Long ago in Egypt, the pharaoh grew fearful as the Hebrew population increased. To control them, he ordered every newborn Hebrew boy to be thrown into the Nile, bringing sorrow to many families. But one mother, Jochebed, refused to give up hope. She hid her baby boy for 3 months. When hiding was no longer safe, she made a waterproof basket and placed her son inside. She set the basket among the Nile reeds while her daughter Miriam watched nearby. Pharaoh's daughter found the crying baby and felt compassion. Miriam offered to find a Hebrew nurse and brought Jochebed to care for her own son. Moses grew up in Pharaoh's palace, but his early years were shaped by his family's love and faith. As Moses grew into a man, he lived a life of luxury and privilege within the lavish walls of the Egyptian palace. He was educated in the wisdom of the Egyptians, learning about art, science, and how to rule. He was powerful and well-respected, a prince of a mighty empire. Yet despite his royal upbringing, he never forgot his true identity. He saw the harsh suffering of his people, the Hebrews, toiling as slaves under the heavy hand of the Egyptians. His heart ached for them. One day, seeing an Egyptian cruelly beating a Hebrew slave, a fire of anger ignited within him. In that moment, he killed the Egyptian and buried him in the sand, an act that would shatter his life in the palace. When Pharaoh heard what Moses had done, he tried to kill him. Fearing for his life, Moses fled from Egypt, leaving behind his title, his authority, and the only home he had ever known. He traveled far into the desert, becoming a lonely fugitive. He eventually found refuge in the land of Midian. There he settled into a new, much simpler life. He became a shepherd, looking after the flocks of a man named Jethro. He married Jethro's daughter, Zipporah, and started his own family. For 40 long years, Moses lived this quiet, humble life, the memories of the Egyptian palace and the cries of his people fading into the vast, silent desert landscape around him. One day, while leading his flock near Mount Horeb, also known as the Mountain of God, Moses saw something extraordinary that stopped him in his tracks. He saw a bush that was completely in flames, yet it was not being consumed. Not a single leaf was turning to ash. It was a sight that defied all logic, a vision of impossible beauty and power. Drawn by a sense of curiosity and wonder, he turned aside to get a closer look at this amazing sight. He had to understand why the bush was on fire but not burning up. This moment of curiosity was the beginning of a profound change, a calling that would change the course of his life and the history of his people. As he drew near, a voice called to him from the burning fire, "Moses, Moses," it thundered. It was the voice of God. Trembling, Moses replied, "Here I am." Then God told him to take off his sandals because he was standing on holy ground. From that burning bush, God revealed his plan. He had seen the suffering of his people in Egypt and heard their cries for help. He had come to rescue them and bring them to a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And he chose Moses, the humble shepherd, the runaway prince, to go to Pharaoh and lead the Israelites out of their slavery. Moses was filled with immense fear and doubt. "Who am I?" he asked God, "that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" He felt small and not good enough, just a simple shepherd who stuttered, not a powerful leader. He was afraid people wouldn't believe him, or that Pharaoh would just laugh at him. But God promised him, "I will be with you." God gave him amazing signs and sent his brother Aaron to speak for him. As his faith slowly grew, Moses went back to Egypt, holding his shepherd's staff, ready to face the most powerful person on earth and demand his people's freedom in the Lord's name. The fight with Pharaoh was long and tough. Pharaoh was stubborn, and he refused to let the Israelites go. In response, God sent 10 terrible plagues upon Egypt, turning the Nile River to blood, sending swarms of frogs and locusts, and covering the land in darkness. Each plague was a powerful show of God's might, yet Pharaoh remained stubborn. The last plague was the worst of all, the death of every firstborn son in Egypt. Only the Israelite homes, marked with the blood of a lamb on their doorposts, were passed over. This event, called the Passover, finally broke Pharaoh's will. He called Moses and told him to take his people and leave Egypt at once. The journey to freedom, called the Exodus, had begun. A huge crowd of men, women, and children left generations of slavery behind, walking towards a future they couldn't even imagine. But their freedom was short-lived. Pharaoh changed his mind again and sent his army, with its scary chariots, to chase after them. The Israelites were trapped between the chasing army and the wide Red Sea. Fear turned into panic, and they cried out to Moses. In this moment of complete hopelessness, Moses, trusting in God's promise, raised his staff over the water. A strong east wind blew all night, splitting the sea and creating a dry path for the people to cross safely. 3 months after their amazing escape from Egypt, the Israelites reached the bottom of Mount Sinai. The mountain was covered in a thick cloud with thunder, lightning, and the sound of a trumpet filling the air. It was a scary and amazing sight. God called Moses to come up the mountain to meet with him. There, in the middle of smoke and fire, God gave Moses the 10 Commandments. These laws, carved on 2 stone tablets, were not just rules. They were the foundation of a covenant, a holy agreement between God and his people. They were a guide for how to live in a community, how to honor God and how to love one another, forming a moral base for generations to come. The journey through the wilderness was no walk in the park. It was a long and tough 40-year trek, a time that tested the faith and patience of Moses and his people at every turn. They faced hunger, thirst, and attacks from enemy tribes. The people often got tired and discouraged, grumbling at Moses and even wishing to go back to Egypt. They forgot the miracles they had seen and found it hard to trust the future God had promised them. Through it all, Moses stood as their go-between, their leader, and their guide. He spoke to God on their behalf, patiently taught them the laws he received, and reminded them of God's steady faithfulness, even when their own faith wavered. Moses had a super close relationship with God. The Bible says the Lord would speak to Moses face to face, just like a friend talks to a friend. This wasn't a relationship based on far-off ceremonies, but on direct personal talks. While others were scared of God's awesome power, Moses would walk right into the tent of meeting, and a pillar of cloud would come down when he was talking with the divine. This special connection was the source of his strength and wisdom. This deep bond helped him lead rebellious and scared people through tough times, his own faith acting as an anchor for a nation drifting in the desert. After 40 years, they finally reached the border of Canaan, the Promised Land. This was the land God had promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob centuries before, a land flowing with milk and honey. However, because of a moment of disobedience earlier in the journey, God told Moses that he would not be the one to lead the people into this new home. Instead, God took Moses up Mount Nebo. From that high vantage point, he showed him the full stretch of the beautiful land. He showed him the rolling hills, the green valleys, and the winding rivers that his people would soon call their own. Moses saw the future he had worked his whole life to secure. Moses' gaze took in the breathtaking view, his heart filled with a mix of feelings, joy for his people, a touch of personal longing, and a deep, overwhelming peace. He had completed his mission. He had brought his people out of slavery, given them God's law, and brought them to the edge of their destiny. His life, which started in a reed basket, became a powerful reminder of the amazing power of a life dedicated to faith, obedience, and God's purpose. Moses died right there on the mountain, and his legacy lives on not just in the laws he gave, but also in the powerful story of a human who walked and talked with God, forever inspiring us to listen for that divine call in our own lives.